Hello again, YouTube. The Real Screeners are back, and this time we're taking a look at Sicario 2, and we're going to let you know whether it reaches or maybe even surpasses the masterful standard set by the original.
Sicario: Day of the Soldado is the continuation to the 2015 hit Sicario, and this movie continues the Mexican cartel conflict that was started in the original. And even though this film doesn't really match up to the original, it still provides some really nice thrilling moments, some shocking moments, and a slightly more hopeless and defeatist tone. The movie stars Josh Brolin, Benicio del Toro, and Isabella Moner, and is directed by Stefano Sollima.
So what you get here with Sicario 2 is a change of director from Denis Villeneuve, and now you have Stefano Sollima.
That's right.
And I would say the more obvious change here is you don't have Roger Deakins doing the cinematography anymore. You have Dariusz Wolski.
That's right.
And you know, Wolski does a really good job. Okay, I don't want to take anything away from his accomplishment. It's just that the first Sicario was just so well shot and so well directed that it really drew you in.
Beautifully shot, Lenny, and you bring up some really good points, and I think that the 2 points that you brought up make all the difference for me. You know, like Denis Villeneuve directed, you know, also Blade Runner 2049 and Arrival, two of my favorite movies of the past couple of years. And you know, you just notice immediately that the style and the colors, the vibrancy, the sets and everything is just not up to par.
This movie,
in this movie.
There were some scenes where the suspense was built up. Of course, they did take their time with certain scenes, but in the first part, it was just so much more obvious and beautiful.
Yeah, man, and Roger Deakins, you know, he won his first Oscar for Blade Runner 2049.
Right, he was nominated for.
He was nominated for Sicario, and he was nominated for No Country for Old Men. So he has a stellar repertoire of films, and it's just sorely missed in this movie. I mean, you notice that it's just not there. The eye candy is not there. That was so beautiful in the original Sicario. So,
but this is still an entertaining movie, especially if you like a lot of shooting, a lot of blood, and some cringy, you know, face twisting moments for sure.
And if you don't, then the movie's not that great, you know. And that's getting into one of the things that I want to talk about, which is, you know, how this movie just hits you right in the face from the very beginning. You know, like you have explosions and a lot of gunshots, and that beautiful buildup from the original Sicario is gone. You know, you don't have that slow build-up with that, you know, low-key music accompanying it, you know, and it's just not the same feeling anymore. It kind of just felt a little rushed and just too much reliance on just explosions, you know?
Right, and before we start really, I mean, before you think that we're trashing the movie, understand that this did have a decent plot, especially how it really delved into the complexities of politics around the border.
That's right.
Just looking at different aspects of, I guess, a human smuggling.
That's right. Yeah. No, I mean, this movie is by no means a bad film. This is a good film. It's just not as, you know, quite as good as the original. As far as the plot is concerned, you know, there are a few things that are just done a little too coincidentally for me.
Yes.
There are specifically, you know, some new characters in this film. One played by Isabella Moner, and I think her name in the movie is Isabel, if I remember correctly.
Isabella Reyes.
Yeah, there you go. And so a couple of plot points, you know, in regards to her character, and another young actor who is kind of like the up-and-coming Sicario or up-and-coming hitman, maybe. You know, things happen, and I don't want to give things away, but they just are too coincidental and too staged. It doesn't feel as natural or organic as the first movie does.
Yeah, it does. What this movie really goes into is, in my opinion, how human drug smuggling and the drug cartels are really pervasive along the border in all aspects of life, and it doesn't matter if you're, you know, Hispanic, if you're white, even if you're from the Middle East. It really goes into the seedy part of the criminal aspect of the border, which, and I don't want to paint the border in a bad light at all. It's a beautiful place, actually. It's just, in certain parts of the south side of the border, it is very sketchy and dangerous.
It's dangerous,
but when you're dealing with that type of human human trafficking, human smuggling, you do have people in that industry who could be white, could be Hispanic, could be anything, and they really mention that in this movie. They show it, actually, don't really mention it.
Okay.
Another thing I liked about the movie in that aspect is, it talks about, in terms of politics, how you have to walk that fine line of morality and ethics.
Oh yeah, well, that's what the first one did so brilliantly, and I actually missed a little bit of that in this movie. I thought that, and I'm gonna talk about Benicio del Toro's character, because I feel like he's the most commanding and compelling character in this movie.
Absolutely, hands down.
Yeah, and he and Emily Blunt in the original film really held the ethical complexities of that movie, but I missed that in this movie. It wasn't as much, and that's what made the first movie, I think, for me, more interesting. But make no mistake, Benicio del Toro here is great and just as good as in the first movie. He is by far the most interesting character. Definitely the character that, he kind of reminds me of like a mixture of like the Terminator and like Robert De Niro in The Deer Hunter, or even in Taxi Driver, just like this kind of like sort of anti-hero, I guess,
Right.
where he's, that he tries to do the right thing, but ultimately he's messed up, and
he's gonna do whatever he has to do.
He's gonna do whatever he has to do and whatever it takes to make sure that he survives. He is a survivor, and that's one of the most admirable things about his character.
And one last thing I want to mention about Benicio del Toro's character, Alejandro, is that, he has these, they really, especially in the third act, you see them really humanizing him, and he has these moments where he has this internal conflict, and it really brings out the human side of him. So they did flesh him out a little bit more. And in regards to Del Toro's acting, his acting chops, in case you had no idea whether or not he was a good actor, or had never seen his movies, just watch this one. There's a huge scene in the third act, which is, it's a little cringy to watch, but his acting really flows through that scene.
It's really good.
Yes, and that puts him on a pedestal for sure.
Yeah.
And lastly, just worth mentioning, Josh Brolin obviously was in this movie. You get a little bit more, a little more intimate with him, I guess. You get to see again another
a little human
side of him.
Although I still feel his character is a little static, but
it is. But
his acting is good.
Yeah, and they did add a little more human element to him this time around.
Yeah.
And lastly, the character Isabella, what's her last name?
Moner,
yes. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think she did some Nickelodeon in the past, and her stage presence is unquestioned in this film. She brings a lot to the table, and I think she has a great future ahead of her.
Yeah, she does. She did a great job.
Yeah.
I felt, definitely.
All right, so let's get to our grades.
Sure, I'll go first. So I decided to give this movie a B-. I was in between a B and a B-, but ultimately I just wish that this movie would have been just as good as the original film. And, Roger Deakins is sorely missed here as a cinematographer. You definitely don't have that nice buildup of suspense that Denis Villeneuve did with the first film, and for me, just the ethical dilemmas, the complexities of the characters, I think, are more interesting in the first film. So that's as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. All right. So I went ahead and gave this film a B+, because like you said, although it didn't quite live up to all the spectacle of the first movie, I did feel like they did a really good job of delving into, again, the human smuggling, the different aspects of border life and how pervasive it is. I did like all of that. I loved the political angle, again, that they took in this movie. The suspense and the...
it's still there.
Yeah, it's still there. So that got a high grade for me. The reason why I knocked it down from an A is because of mostly two main things. Okay, number one, I kind of felt like the movie kind of didn't know where it wanted to go in the third act. I felt like they left a lot of loose ends out there.
Yeah, a lot of resolution.
They kind of moved away from some of the main conflicts, and they just started varying different ways. And then number two, I didn't like how it ended. Okay, everyone's going to be talking about that ending. And for me, I was in my seat in the theater, kind of making this face like...
Yeah, it's just not a very strong resolution.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have to think too much. Sure, leave some things to the imagination, but...
When you leave the fate of so many of the characters so unresolved, I think that's an issue. But I read that there early talks about a third Sicario.
Okay.
And that Emily Blunt might be back, actually. Okay, well, so that's what I hear, and I'm not, entirely sure, but we'll see what happens with that.
We'll see. All right, that wraps it up for us guys today. As always, if you disagree or agree with us, if you feel like this movie is better than the first one, which I've heard, let us know in the comments down below.
Yeah, I mean, on IMDb, I think right now it has the same rating as the original Sicario, so some people are liking it just as much, so let us know what you think. And also, don't forget to follow us on Stardust at Beto Cuckoo.
And I'm at LJ5625. And of course, as always, if you like our videos, hit that subscribe button.
That's right, and thank you for watching.
All right, see you next time.
Ultimately, I was hoping, I guess, that it was... that it would be just as good as the first movie, and I was disappointed that Roger Deakins wasn't back, not that Stefano Salami or...
Salami?
So, what did I say?
You said salami. Stefano grilled cheese sandwich.
Oh.
That's a blooper, man. Stefano salami.